Are you guys ready? So the question I have for you is, what are you ready for? Yeah, but there's words. Words do not teach, right? If we think about it, words don't teach. The only thing I can do here this morning is have a conversation with your memory. I want that to sink in for just a second. I can only have a conversation with your memory. The challenge is that when we remind ourselves we want more, how many of us have ever set a goal and fallen short of it? How many times have we reminded ourselves of that goal and still fallen short of it? Listen carefully. The mind, when we say mind, it's always the past. If I were to say to you, remind me that I need to call Scott at 4 o'clock, but remind me at 3:30. What are you going to do? Remind me at 3:30. Of what? Of a moment that happened at 10:48 in the morning. Even when we talk about in the future, I have to remind myself, we always remind ourselves of what? And when we set goals, where do we set goals? But how can we get to them? From the past. You starting to see the dichotomy that exists? You starting to see why sometimes our thoughts and our actions don't equal our results? There's a reason that happens. And it's a chemical reason. It's called addiction. We're addicted to who we are. So if we could spend the next hour, I usually do 4-day seminars on this, if we could spend the next hour and have a conversation to where you could start to see ways you could chip away at the addiction called you to get to that person you call you, would that be worth your time this morning? You sure? Here's a couple of things I need you to be aware of. I'm going to challenge what you know. Would it be fair to say that if after you leave today, you want to do something you've never done before? Would that be a fair statement most of us would want to do? In order to do something you've never done before, you have to do what? Think a way you've never thought before. And if we think a way we've never thought before, how do we feel when we talk about something we don't know about? So, I want to set a goal. I got to do something I've never done, think a way I've never thought, and feel a way I've never felt. Isn't that a recipe for disaster? And yet we go, I'm going to get so excited, I'm going to do it. And then what shows up that takes us out of that energy? And who told you to be fearful? Somebody else did. It's why it's called addiction to approval. And if we can begin to chip away that addiction to approval, the world will unlock itself for you. Is it okay if we have that conversation this morning? This is yes, this is no. This isn't TV. I can see you and hear you. Okay, it's the new key to success. Now, there's nothing new. We were talking about that. I had an amazing conversation with these ladies this morning. There's nothing new. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, right? I got that right. One of the things you'll learn about me is I barely made it through high school. I drove by a lot of colleges. I had a 0.9 grade point average. My dad said, you want to make a lot of money? Stand in front of the room. The guy in the front of the room with the pen makes the most money. So I learned how to get in front of the room. That's the only reason I'm here. Not because I'm smarter than you. I've gotten good at something I've decided to get good at, and I've spent my time getting good at that. Emerson said, there's something you do so well, people wish they could do it half as well. Take out your pen and paper and write down that thing you do so well, people wish they could do half as well. I don't care if it's cooking, I don't care if it's singing, I don't care if it's dancing, clogging. Write down that thing you do so well. How many of you are having a little trouble trying to think of what I do so well? Ask one of the people at your table, what is it that you like about me? Wait a minute, you mean I got to ask somebody else what they think of me? Welcome to Approval to Addiction. I'm not asking anybody what they think of me. Now, what if I change it? Hey, listen, ask the people at the table what they think you don't do so well. Tell me, I want to get better. Why do you want to get better at something you're not good at? It's okay for you to get great at what you're good at. I went to a private high school. And I say that only because I'm going to use the word headmaster. Don't go, it wasn't in the movie kind of headmaster school. But my mom and dad went to the headmaster when I graduated high school and said, he still can't spell. You know what the headmaster's answer was back to my parents? He'll have people around him that know how to spell. So the thing you think you're not good at, there's 1,000 people waiting to give you a handout. There's 1,000 people waiting to help you up. What makes you think you have to do it all by yourself? So if we talked about this, used by the self. If I were to ask you, who's the biggest critic of you? It ain't rocket science. Point to the most important person in the room. Do it, point to it, physically point to it. Everybody points here. How come y'all didn't take your shoe off and point to your pinky toe? Because that ain't who you are. How come I didn't see anybody point up here? That ain't who you are. You're here. How many of us know that the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain does to the heart? Raise your hand. Then what are we doing up here? How many of us have ever decided not to do something because we said, well, it just doesn't feel right? When's the last time your brain had a feeling? But all feelings are made up of what? Chemicals. Tell me the last time somebody opened up their brain and put a picture in it. Tell me the last time somebody opened up their brain and put sadness into it. We didn't. It's inside and it shows up based on what? Chemicals that produce what? Emotions that produce what? An outward experience. Is this making sense? This is science. So if we dive into that, would that be okay? This is yes, this is no. Would that be okay? All right. So, what is the psychological blueprint? That's what we're going to talk about today. How to find yours, how to build yours. If you haven't, how many of us, when we think of blueprint, we think of something that's planned out? How many of you have ever sat down and asked, what am I good at? What am I bad at? What are my triggers that cause me to fail? What are my triggers that cause me to succeed? How many of you have sat down and written those out and you got 100 of each? I heard the noises. Don't you have 100 triggers that make you happy? You got thousands of them. How many of you have 100 friends? There's at least 100 triggers. How many of you have 100 triggers that send you off on the deep end? See, if you recognize them, same 100. Did you hear that? I just heard that. So, Jim Rohn said it best. What was Jim Rohn saying? A handful of things will help you what? Win, and a handful of things will help you lose. And the difference is which one you do consistently. If you were to take a snapshot of your life right now on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is everything you want in life and 1 is not, where would you see yourself? I can promise you this, if it's anything less than a 10, you're shortchanging yourself. Because at this moment, can you get any better than you are in this second? Can you? Yes or no? Can you get any better than you are this second? No, not this second. You can see it in the future, but this is what happens. This is the conversation we have with ourselves. How many of us have talked ourselves into a panic attack? How many have talked ourselves down into the spiral? Who knows Lynn Grabhorn? Excuse me, your life is waiting. Great book. Excuse me, your life is waiting. She says if you're going to go down that spiral, if you're going to fall into that hole of hell, do it quickly and then get out. Don't tiptoe around the edge. Well, I'm having a bad day, kind of bad day. It could be an okay day. No, go have a day full of you-know-what hit the fan and be done with it. Get it out of your system. We're going to talk about how that blueprint works. So, understanding, why do you need to know your own? If you're your best critic or your worst critic, wouldn't it help if you understood how to talk to who? How many of us have conversations to ourselves? How many thoughts a day do we have? 60,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. You want to know what this is? Write this down. Success is a math problem. Success is a math problem. If we have 60,000, 70,000 thoughts a day, does anyone know the number that science says how many we're aware of? About 5,000. Right? If you're a mom of a toddler, maybe a little bit more. But we're aware of thoughts, and what is a thought? A decision, a conversation we have where we're either going to say yes or no. So if we have 70,000 thoughts and we're aware of 5, how many does that leave? 65,000 thoughts? And where do you think those thoughts got made up from? Are they all in the future, or are they all reminding? So it's a math problem. If you have 5,000 of the best, greatest thoughts today, it's still got to deal with how many from the crappy thoughts from yesterday. 65,000. Success is a math problem. Which is why we talk about what? Meditation. What does meditation do? It slows down the mind. What does journaling do? While you're writing this, can you think about the cat and the cat litter and the dogs and the got to get things to the cleaners? And no, you're writing a note and you're in that moment. Now, you can multitask. Multitasking, we find out, isn't so hot. And ladies, your brain works a lot different than ours. How many of us have seen the guy on YouTube who does the difference between men's brain and women's brain? Y'all seen that? Oh my God, it's hysterical. You got to watch it if you haven't. Just Google men's brain, women's brain. He's in a black outfit. And he talks about guys' brains. And what does he say about the guys' brains? We have one box that we try to get to. Who remembers it? What's the box we try to get to? Bingo! What are you doing? Nothing. We ain't lying. We're always trying to get there. Honey, take the garbage out. Part of our psychological blueprint is we'll go pull out that garbage box. We'll go take out the garbage. And then our goal is to put the garbage box back in, making sure it doesn't do what? Touch anything else. Yet women, on the other hand, everything is connected. That's why I can't have a conversation with you and totally grasp what you're saying, because my brain's going, gotta get to the nothing box, gotta get to the nothing box, gotta get to the nothing box. And yours like, wow, those shoes remind me of, I had this girlfriend in high school was this, and boy, I really didn't like her. She stole my boyfriend. Well, Tom, now he's the It's like, what the heck? So would it be fair to say that maybe your psychological blueprint as a gender is a lot different than ours? Yours is caring and sharing based on design. Ours is fix it. So if you understood your psychological blueprint a little bit better, would that make sense? This is yes, this is no. Okay. So, how many of us have ever felt like that? I've been accused a lot of times of being a guy in a woman's body, so I have felt like that. But the point is that it's just, what is that feeling? When you see that, what does that feeling mean? What do you see? She just didn't get the job of her life, did she? No. Maybe she got a job she doesn't want, that email she didn't need to. And so what do you now do with all of that information? How many of us, y'all were up here catching the ball before, how many of you just constantly let it hit you in the chest? Would you be asked to stay in the circle if every time I threw you the ball you never caught it? You'd be asked to what? Get out. So by design, we're taught we got to catch everything that's thrown at us. What if you change your psychological blueprint that you only caught the things that what? Bingo! So do you have a blueprint? Do you have a checklist of what matters, what doesn't matter? Yeah, but how often do you follow it? Is this making sense? My dad said, I come out of the business world, if it makes sense, it'll make dollars. You have the right to be happy. Who told you you couldn't? We're only on slide 1. So here's the thing. I have slides up here. I'm not a slide guy. I'm a conversation guy. More importantly, I'm a dialogue guy. Is there a difference between a monologue and a dialogue? Emerson said the challenge with dialogue is most people think they have one. More often than not, it's two monologues that happen to bump into each other during a conversation, and I can't wait for you to shut up long enough for me to tell you about the thing that I just remembered because you told me. In order to have a dialogue, you've got to get better at love. Is it okay if you listen to me for just a little bit? Is it okay if I listen to you? This is yes. This is no. How many things in our life would we want to have said yes to more often? I'm trying to trick your mind into saying yes more often. Is that okay? This is yes, this is no. All right. Who is this guy? I'm a certified life coach, certified licensed self-talk facilitator and trainer, certified addiction approval coach. I'm an international speaker and trainer for 30 years, and I'm the founder of Mental Profits, where your thoughts do create your income. How many of us talk about economies today, right? The business economy, the health economy, the this economy. Write this down. There ain't no economy. There's only your economy. Man, and I can't wait till it ain't never coming back. Yesterday is gone. You want to know what the new economy is? The knowledge economy. If you get paid by the hour for your ideas, you need to up it. You need to get paid by the idea, not the hour. If you get paid by the hours for your ideas, you need to up it. You need to get paid by the idea. Isn't that how you get a promotion, is by the idea? Whether you have it or somebody else has of you? If I want to promote Scott, it's because I got an idea. I can go do something else. It's an idea. I'm paying him to take over. How many of you last week? Okay, so I got to ask you 3 questions. Can I ask you 3 quick questions? Do I have your permission to help? So I need to look around real quick. You got nod, yes, 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 yes. Okay, that's question number 1. That's an easy one. Question number 2. I promise if you answer it properly, you'll love question number 3. Do I have your permission to make you just the littlest bit uncomfortable? Okay, cool. Do I have your permission to take you out of that uncomfortable feeling? I promise I won't leave you there before we leave today. Is that okay? Good. Take your paycheck last week, take how many ideas you had, divide the ideas into the paycheck, that's what you get paid per idea. How many of you think your ideas are worth more? Who do you believe is limiting you from selling those ideas out on the open market? We have a global stage called Facebook, called Twitter, called Instagram, called fill in the blank social media. Why do you think you have to be limited? Well, nobody wants to hear what I say. Did you all write down the thing you do so well nobody else does that good? Somebody, I promise you, if it's cooking, somebody give me pheasant under glass on Thursdays, there's a group of people out there that'll pay $30,000 a year to learn that. The challenge is you don't know. You don't know who they are. Can you have $1 million ideas? My dad asked me from the moment I graduated high school, I didn't go to college, I started running businesses. He said, I want you every day to have $1 million idea. When does $1 million idea become worth $1 million? When people know about it. So who's got to know about it first? Does it mean I'm going to sell every one of them? My bride last night, I can't believe this. We're married. Today is our 20th anniversary of our blind date. And last night in bed, now I've known this woman for 20 years. Last night she says, did you know that Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky? I'm like, where have you been? Who knew that? Who knew Sylvester? Thank you. Oh. And she looked at me and I go, you're kidding, right? So there was an idea out there that everybody knew, but I think only 2 people in the world, and one of them was my bride last night, didn't know that Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky. If that was her idea to make $1 million, she's waited 20 years that I know of for that to show up. How many of you could come up with $1 million idea today? Everybody's hand go up. Yeah, right? It's called, we were talking earlier, Diane and I were talking earlier about the reticular activating system. She knows what it is. You can't answer. Who knows what that is? You all know what that is, right? What you look for, you find. How many of you know the basketball, the white shirts, the black shirts, right? Y'all have seen that? How many of you went, what monkey? Exactly. It's because we are only looking for what? What we're focusing on. What are you focusing on? Look at last week's paycheck. That's what you focused on. Remember question number 2, I could make you feel a little uncomfortable? That's what you couldn't have focused on anything else. Yeah, but you don't understand my situation. My mentor would say, you're right, I'm rich, let's move on. I'm not here to argue with you. This is all about the blueprint. This is what I've done for 30 years. Is it okay if I share some of it with you? This is yes, this is no. Okay. So, where have I spoken? I've spoken in the U.S., Canada, all across Mexico, Latin America. I've spoken in 30 countries. And so all of these places, what does all of this mean? Whip-de-doo. That and 35 cents won't get you a cup of coffee next door at the Mexican place. It just means that I do have some experience. And people have paid me for it. They didn't pay me for my education because I got a what? High school education. We think, man, I got to have a degree. Put your last name down on the paper. No, got your last name down on the paper? Right next to it, put the big capital letter U. That's the university you went to. What'd you pay to go to that university? Everything you got. You paid more than any Harvard, any Oxford, any Rhodes Scholar, any master's degree, any doctorate degree. Haven't you paid more than that in your lifetime to get to that university? Why don't you study you? Because the answer is always where? You think it's out there. That's why you came to this event. I'm gonna get a nugget today, and I'm gonna turn it on, fire it up, and tune in, and I'm done. How many of you are coming back to next month's event? Because we're constantly learning about University U. That's what I've done in 35 languages. I've never spoken about what I have. I've spoken about what you can become, how you unlock, how you unleash who you are. Because can you be anybody else than who you are? Then don't try to be me. Good God, don't try to be me. Be you. But we've all heard that before, right? How many times in marketing is repetition? How many times do we have to repeat something before somebody buys something? How many times have you heard that you're awesome? Today. Why don't we believe it more? Because we're addicted to our remind. We're addicted to our past. So, who's this for? Anyone who coaches people, deals with people, has to do. Anybody have to deal with rejection? Got it. Okay, good. Who's a people pleaser? Don't raise your hand. See, I told you, don't raise your hand. Don't have to please me. You get this? And anyone who's building a team or organization in sales. Because what's your job as the manager, the motivator, is to keep them fired up because they're going to get a no. What's worse than a no? A yes that doesn't work. Did you know there's 3 kinds of yeses? There's a commitment yes, there's a confirmation yes, and there's a counterfeit yes. How many of you have picked up the phone, it was a telemarketer, and said, do you like drinking clean, fresh water? What are you going to say? But you know dang well I'm going to sell you something, and so it's like this, oh! You just want to say, no, I like drinking Swill by Click. When you put somebody in a position to force them into a yes will never work if no is not possible. FYI. So, counterfeit, confirmation. Yeah, I'm going to be there. Let me just check my schedule. How many people have ever said that to you coming to an event? I'll teach you how, if I could teach you something, how to get through all of that, how to deal with the counterfeit, how to deal with the confirmation, to get to the commitment yes, which is very rare. You all said yes. If I could teach you how to get to the commitment, would that be worth your time? Write it down, remind me as we go through the workshop. What's this workshop about? It's about control. Who wants to have more control? Over what? Yeah, absolutely. So, what do we have to have control over? There's only two things really we can focus on, time and money. But can we really manage time? What have you all learned about time management? It ain't time management. It's event management. It's energy management. Does that make sense? And if we can put our energy at a higher level and we can have higher ideas with higher energy, it means we could have higher what? Income. And where does all of that come down to? The brain. How many of us know there's three parts to the brain? There's a lot of parts. But the three parts we talk about, the prefrontal cortex, right? The thinking. Then there's what? The lizard brain, right? The autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight. And then there's, well, how many of us have ever heard of the limbic part of the brain? How many of us, if Scott opened up my brain, there wouldn't be a whole lot in here, but if he opened up my brain, how many places could he go find the words to this presentation? Could he find any of the words written on the inside of my brain? What would he find? Chemicals. Dopamine, adrenaline, big 50-cent words I can't say as a 25-cent farmer. But there's all of these chemicals. How many of us have a routine? We understand that the brain operates in routines, right? It finds routines because that's the easiest way for it. It uses 30% of our energy, but the best way for it to allow it to have new thoughts is to be able to have all routines. Routines are addiction. The brain is addicted to the routine. How many of you have a routine you would like to change? You would like to get better at? It's a chemical addiction. You have to overcome it through either. The only way you can shut off the amygdala, the fight or flight, is through two things: drugs or alcohol. Anybody start drinking yet? No, so we have to be able to produce our own what? Chemicals. That's why we come to events like this. So the agenda, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We're going to talk about addiction to approval, how to get started, why we're wired the way we are, why it's in our DNA. How many of us do things our parents did? How many people know us, know our parents, and go, oh my God, you're just like your dad? That's my boy right there, Mason. You see him scooting real quick? There's a lot of things he does that's just like his grandfather. Oh my gosh, just like his grandfather. Michelle's dad. So Michelle will see him do something and I'll go, that was Gary. Now, his grandfather passed when he was 6. How can he do things as his grandfather did at 14 if he doesn't know his grandfather? It's all wired in. How wired in, baby? So we're going to talk about all this stuff. How to build the blueprint. And hopefully I'm going to skip like 1 through or 2 through 4 and get down to 5 and influence, how to have it. Are you aware of the 6 areas of influence? A lot of times, anybody have a job, right? How many times do they come out with an incentive program? How many of us, anybody know anybody in network marketing? And they have the annual trip, and you can go do X, Y, and Z. I was vice president of sales. The only job I ever had, I was asked to become vice president of sales of a $200 million network marketing company. Not a bad gig, my first job. I couldn't fill out the application. It's a whole other story. The point is this. When we launched a promotion, we could tell you exactly who was going to get it before it ever started. Why? Because they have a routine of success. So and the reason that it only worked for those certain people is because we dealt with 2 areas of influence and the other 4 kept everybody out of the game and we didn't know it at the time. So, addiction to approval. What does it mean to be an addict? Throw it out. What does it mean to be an addict? Say again? Dependent, yep. Say one more time. Chasing the feeling, right? What else? Lack of control. Pleasure seeker. Impulsive. So how many of us in the room, if we use those words, would have to raise our hand and say we're an addict? Hi, my name's Sean, and I'm an addict. Every one of us would. Because there's something we do that's not the best interest of us, but it's the best interest of somebody else, and we will do it so we can make them happy, and we can go see, I sacrificed myself to be me. Is it okay if you have more? Boy, that was a church mouth stuff. Is it okay if you have more? Who do you have to get permission from to have more? One person. So I want you to all say this out loud, and we may say it twice because you may not get it right on the first time. I give myself permission to win. Now, if you looked around the room as this was going on, a couple of things happened. How many of you that might have been the first time you ever said that publicly in a room today? If you looked around, a lot of you blinked. What do we say in negotiations? All we're going to do is negotiation, and the first one that... So if you blinked, you what? You just lost that commitment. So go home in the mirror and say, I promise you, sometimes you won't even know where to look. Who in the room's left-handed? Cool. So typically, when you're in negotiations, you look at somebody's right eye. If you're right-handed, go home and look in your right eye and say, I give myself permission to win. If you're left-handed, look in your left eye. Do you know how to find your dominant eye? Y'all know how to do that? Right? You point at something, then you close one eye and close the other, and whichever one the finger's on, that's your dominant eye. Go look at that dominant eye. That connects at a cellular level into the brain. This is going to be some good stuff. I wish I was sitting in the chairs. This is some good stuff. Uh-oh, here we go. What'd I do? See, anybody can do this. Hey, look at that. So, addict, if we look it up, what kinds of addicts are there? When we think of somebody who's an addict, what's the first thing comes to our mind? Drugs, alcohol. What other kind of addicts are there? Shopping, porn. Yep. And when somebody says, I'm going to go fix that, what's the thing that we normally have to do for them? We have to usually give them some kind of what? Another drug to contradict that. So if your addiction to approval, what's the drug that you can use to get over that? I didn't even know this addiction existed until about 20 minutes ago. Yeah, so what happens is if I'm addicted to, it's Frisco, right? So yes, Francisco. Cisco. So if I'm addicted to Francisco and I'm not going to listen to him anymore, when an addict is going through withdrawal, what's the thing we hope they don't do? Relapse. And relapse is meaning I got to get rid of the pain. So if I'm addicted to approval and I'm not going to let him govern my approval anymore, and I step away and I start to feel the pain, what am I going to go do? That's why it's called repetition. It's why we do. How many of us have ever done something we knew we shouldn't have done? We said we were never going to do it, and we did it again, and then we said we were never going to do it, and then we did it again, and then we said we were never going to do it, and we did it again. Because of an addiction, because of a chemical cocktail. It's 65,000 thoughts a day. We have this chemical cocktail that's happening. So there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's all kinds of addictions. What does it mean to be an addict? What's really happening when somebody has an addiction? Chemical override. Drugs can override. Right? How many of us have ever heard of a placebo test, right? Double-blind study. What do they talk about placebos, the sugar pill? What do they say about it? Sometimes it's more powerful than the drug. Our chemical brain can create drugs more powerful than morphine. What are you sitting here going, man, I gotta get better? You're already brilliant. You're addicted to staying at this level. Who knows Bob Proctor? Right? I'll never forget Bob Proctor. I became a student of his years ago. This was back in the early 2000s. maybe 2002, and I'll never forget the conversation he has about the this and the this and the this and the this, right? Who remembers that when we fire a rocket from here and we send it to the moon, what percentage of time is it on the exact course from here to there? Who remembers? So that means the rest, the 3%, is the rest of the time it's what? How many of us are ever on course 3%? How many of us, if our life changed, we could get on course 3% of the time, our life wouldn't even recognize it a year from now? You just got to be willing to course correct what? Fast. Quicker. And the way you recognize and course correct faster and quicker is if you recognize your what? Off course, the triggers. That's why I asked you, what's your 100 triggers that send you into a tailspin? What's the 100 triggers that send you into joy? Back to Jim Rohn, which one of those 100 would you want to hang out with? Because it's your what? Choice. Is this making sense? So, how powerful is a chemical addiction? How many of us know somebody that we go, oh my God, they've been like this forever? Here's the thing. How many of us have ever been cut off at work or cut off in a car in the road going to work, or we know somebody that got cut off and at the water cooler they're talking about it, it's 11:30 and that happened at 7 o'clock this morning. They're going, you should see the son of a gun that cut me off this morning. That's called a state of mind. I bet if we watch that person, they're the same person that talks about the car getting cut off, who then also talks about, that reminds me of that guy who 2 years ago wanted to buy my house and it fell through. And then they'll talk about something from 5 years ago. We call that person, they have a mood. How many of us have ever gotten into a mood? How many of us have ever said, avoid them, they're in a mood? Do we ever refer to mood as a good thing? No, we would refer that to, they're excited. See, every word has a vibration. And every time we use that word, we put it out in the universe. But in order for it to go out into the universe and for us to hear it, who else has to hear it? We do. And we have to take ownership of that vibration. How many of us know somebody who could walk into the room and everybody just goes, or, and they didn't say anything? You're one of those people. What do you want people to say when you walk into a room? When you walk into a room by yourself, who is in the room? 3 people, you, yourself, and I. How many of us have ever said, oh my God, I wish I could just stop these thoughts? It just proves we're not ourselves. It just proves we are not ourselves. Is this making sense? Have you thought of something you could do already to help you get better at being you? What would it be worth if you did it? What would it be worth if you could just break one of those bars out? Maybe you ain't got free yet, but if you just broke one of the bars and you gave yourself what? Begins with H. Hope. How many of us know Pandora's box? Does anybody know from mythology why they didn't want Pandora's box opened? When we think of Pandora's box opening, we think of what coming out? Chaos, the worst. You know why the gods didn't want Pandora's box open? One thing. They didn't want to release hope into the world. If you have hope, can I stop you? Aren't miracles the result of hope? Children come into this world. From where? From hope. The joy. How many of you can remember a moment of joy in your life? Well, it's joy compared to what? Everything else that was not joy. When you were in that state of joy, didn't you have hope that it would continue? Y'all know this. Y'all are this. I'm just going to help you get out of there. How many of us have ever heard the expression, out of the pan and into the... Stop! There is no fire. You get out of there, you're still not in the penitentiary. You're what? Free. And if you could find a little bit more freedom, would you? Wouldn't you? So in order for you to be more free, other people who are around you right now may not follow you. Who knows the story of the crabs in a bucket? You're going to have people grabbing your leg. Who doesn't know the stories of the crab in the bucket? Cool. If I take a bucket and I put a crab in there, the crab's going to try to get what? I put another crab in there. This one stopped trying to get out. I can take the lid off. They did this experiment with fleas. You all know that, right, too? Fleas jump up, they hit the lid, they hit the lid, they hit the lid, they take the lid off, they jump up, and they stop right there before where the lid used to be. So I put the crabs in the bucket, the crab's trying to get out, it stops trying to get out because it knows it can't what? Get out. I put another crab in, that crab's going to try to do what? Get out. You know what the crab that's in there does? Get over here. And then that one tries and tries and tries, and this other one says, no, you ain't getting out, you ain't getting out. So now we got two crabs who ain't getting out. You know what happens if we put the third crab in there? They eat it. They literally tear it apart. How many people around you are tearing you apart right now? And you're stuck there in your own mind because you go, well, I'm just not ready yet. When will you be? When will you be? It's time for you to have more of what you want, less of what you don't. So, are you an addict? I was, and I'm working on it every day. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you some questions. My story, there I am, vice president of sales of a $100 million company. There's my dad, my greatest teacher. Said, you can go to school and spend the next 4 years in college, or you can drive down to some place in Mulberry, Florida, where we got an office, kind of, sort of, and you can be in business. Drove down to the office, spent the next 2 years sleeping on a cot, because I thought it was cool. Didn't know he didn't have any money. That's a whole other story. Greatest teacher of my life. There's a little boy. He probably left the room. But that's Mason when he was a baby. Couldn't hold him now, could I? But that was one of the joys that came into our life after Michelle. This is me standing in China in front of 3,000 people. A farm boy from Ohio, barely made it through high school. They paid me a lot of money to go stand on a stage in China. That was the second time I was in China. First time they paid $70,000 for the day. What do you want to get paid a day? I was shocked. I said, whatever you guys think are fair. They said, well, based on what we're going to ask you to do, you're going to spend the whole day. Would $70,000 be okay? What should I have done if I was in negotiation? No, because I left what? A whole probably bunch of money on the table. But perception is reality. Write that down. I thought that's a lot of money, and guess what? It was. If they called me back, guess what happens to the price? That's a whole other story. So anyway, so that's my story. Let's take a quiz. Okay, so how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hand, I know the science behind this, I know the statistics already, how many of you, we asked thousands and thousands of people, how many of you believe you're addicted to approval? Research shows about 9% right off the bat said, yeah, that's me. I just need that. After we asked them these 10 questions, what do you think that 9% went to? I'm going to wait and show you at the end, but it sounds like you already took the quiz. So I need you to answer these questions. Just put a Y or an N on your paper. How addicted are you to other people's approval? Research shows what actually they're addicted to. So here's the test questions. Have you ever failed to ask for something you really wanted for the fear of hearing no? Have you ever held back from expressing your opinion in a group setting? Have you ever followed other people's advice even when you thought they were wrong in order to please them? Yes or no? Did you ever go to college or choose a major or get married or stay married or have kids or select a career because you didn't want to disappoint your parents, family, or friends? Were you ever dying to ask someone out on a date but didn't because you were terrified of being rejected? Have you ever backed down from voicing your opinion on social media for fear of being judged? I thought that was a cute picture, right? You go in as a person on Facebook, you come out as a judge. Have you ever experienced fear when asked to speak in public? Have you ever felt self-conscious about eating or drinking in a public place by yourself? I was in, where was I? I was in Utah. No, it couldn't have been Utah because I had alcohol. It was, where was it? Tennessee. And flights were late and everything else, and we got the vouchers to go to the hotel, and we got off the plane, we all wound up in the hotel, and there was this one person, this one woman who was kind of the rabble-rouser, the team leader. And I had had enough, not of her, just been a long day, and so I went to the bar, and I said, what's a nice Merlot you have? I said, I'll take a bottle of it, and I took it, and I said, I'll take a glass, and I started walking to my room, and she looked at me, and she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go have some wine in my room. And she goes, what a loser! We're all having drinks. You got to go drink in your room by yourself? Click, word. The program started running. So I said, no, you know what? You guys look like you're just going to have so much fun. I am going to go to my room, and I'm going to enjoy myself there. But what would have some of us done? Well, all right, I'll just hang out. I'll just have one. You can't be afraid. Do you think the person that you're trying to become is afraid? The person you're trying to become, of course, Ricardo said there is no try. Do not. The person that you are shooting for, are they scared of what you're feeling right now? That's why you're not there yet. And then I think, have you ever felt uneasy about either being overdressed or underdressed for an occasion? How's that for overdressed? And then this is an actual picture in Canada. Is that Bieber? What's his name? Beaver? So, yeah. So, when we look at this again, and we go back to this, and I asked you, so what percentage of people do you think are actually addicted based on the studies? 99.8%. We're all addicted. Sean, that ain't 100. What's the other 2%? Schizophrenics who really don't care what anybody thinks. That's the science behind it. Schizophrenic, they have no control over it. They've lost that ability. So if that's the case and we're all addicted, we got to go to what? Rehab. Why don't most addicts go to rehab? They're afraid. They got to hit bottom. They also have to do something very important. They have to admit it, don't they? Once we begin to admit things, Mason, you've come home sometimes and had some challenges at school, and you told me the truth right up front, right? You thought maybe I'd do something or I'd respond some way. What was my normal response? Okay. If we're fighting, having an argument, and I say, you know what, I love you, where's the argument going to go? So the next time you have fear and doubt show up, what do you have to say to fear and doubt? I love you. Who's heard the expression, fear and doubt knocked on the home of faith and courage? Faith and courage opened the door, and no one was in. Next time fear and doubt shows up, thank them. They have gotten you to here. But like anybody else, in order to get away from here, the thoughts you got that got you here ain't going to get you out of here. Einstein said it a little more eloquently. The ideas of man that got us here the problems of man today cannot be solved with the same mind of man today. I just say the thoughts that got you here ain't going to get you out of here. So, we've got to start. Oh, Dr. Shad Helmstetter, who knows him? Great books. Power of Neuroplasticity. Who knows what neuroplasticity is? Where we rewire the mind. They used to say when we were growing up, they said all the brain cells you got are all the brain cells you got. And if you do drugs or alcohol, you're going to get stupid. What they're now saying is that we can rewire and refire our brain in new thoughts. Right now, how many of you have heard something new? Same 26 letters, it was just the syntax I put it in. It created new neural pathways. And the only reason that any of it makes sense is because if it's so new, sintered silicon carbide versus sintered silicon carbide. What? That has nothing to do with what we were talking about. Those are mechanical seal faces that I used to sell 30 years ago. That's got nothing to do with what we were talking about. I know, so there's no way we could create new neural pathways. You follow me? What I'm talking about is just close enough to what you already know that you can stretch it and go, okay, I'll think about that. Dr. Shad Helmstetter said, how many of you know what to say when you talk to yourself? You ever hear that book or read that book? Great book to read, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. That's why I'm a certified self-talk instructor. He says that anything you say, anything that's been said to you, any thought you have has been recorded in your brain. That which you repeat on a regular basis becomes what? How many of us can't think of phone numbers anymore because we don't have to dial them? But and some of us have said, man, I used to know all the numbers. You just reminded yourself you used to be good. See how we talk ourselves into the hole? He also wrote another great book, Choices and Who Are You? Who do you really think you are? He's the father of self-talk. 40 years he's been doing this. Neuroplasticity is now like the in thing. Kind of like hybrid cars or solar power. How long has solar power been around? How many of you got sunburnt before they had solar generators? And solar power has been around for a long time. Here's the funny thing. How many of you can think of somebody that's absolutely you love and adore, some kind of mentor who's been deceased, but you would just, if you had an hour with them, your life would change? Can you think of anybody that's past that would be that person? Guess what? They saw the same sun you did. They see the same sun you still see. You think you could ask them for their help by looking at the sun? You don't look at it. You know what I mean? The same moon. Anybody, it doesn't matter in the age of time, since time exists, anybody you want to gather from, you see the same things they see. Sit down and ask yourself, when they looked at that, what did they ponder? You'll have new ideas flood your mind. So, success formula. What do you think that says? Thoughts plus actions equal results. Here's the challenge. When your thoughts and your actions are out of line, what do you get? They say 90% of all doctor visits are because of one thing. Because of what? You know why we have more heart attacks on Monday, right? You know that because people don't want to go to work, right? Between 11 and 2, more heart attacks occur in any other day of the week. But you know why we're having heart attacks and not brain attacks? Because our gut and our brain, oh my God, I just get this feeling in my gut and I got to go to work, blah, 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 blah. And then we talk ourselves through it. And so where's it trying to reconcile all of this energy? Anybody ever heard of the Heart Meth Lab in California? They did a study. Y'all ready for this? See, I ain't smart. I'm informed. Makes me seem smart. In the Heart Meth Lab, they did a study. And how many of you like snakes? How many of you would rather not look at snakes? Okay. How many of you love beautiful sunsets? So what they did in this study, you know the study I'm talking about. What they did in the study is that on a computer screen, how many of you look at computer screen? How many of you fret opening up your email? That's a whole other story. So on this computer screen, they had the person click a button and there was a 6-second where there was nothing, and then a picture popped up. And if you saw a snake with its big old fangs open and everything else, you might do what? And then screen goes away, click the button, 6 seconds of nothing, another picture pops up, and this time it's a beautiful couple standing in front of a waterfall. Okay, where's the science? You want to know what the science is? 6 to 15 seconds before the picture showed up, the heart adjusted to the picture. 6 to 15 seconds before the picture showed up, the heart already adjusted for what the picture was going to be. You want to talk about some crazy science? So if it was a snake, the heart increased in rate. And they proved it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. What do you think the percentage of error was? Like they talk about in voting, right? Or elections, 3% or whatever. Less than 1%. Margin of error, less than 1%. So how many of you go to open your email and go, click? How many of you realize that the only reason that your stomach gets a knot in it is because the heart sent a message to the brain, then down the vagus nerve and into your gut, and that's why you have to, I'm going to operate on my gut feeling. No, you're operating on your heart feeling. You just didn't know it. Y'all get this? How many of you know that your stomach has about as many neurons in it as the smartest dog you can think of? Why did the brain develop to put all of this energy down into the gut? This education, information, ability to recognize things into the gut. So the brain could keep doing what it is, otherwise we'd have a brain this big. Pretty funny how the universe creates. So what would it take for you to stay in your heart more? Remember the 100 things of what you need to trigger love and the 100 things that need to trigger something else? How many of you would want to stay in your heart more often? Could you still stay in your heart and be strong? How many of us have kids? How many of us ever loved our kids through punishment? You can giggle. But we do it. We can still have our heart. We can still be out here, and we can still say, I choose not to let anybody damage me. Because I choose not to catch all of the stuff that's thrown at me. Does that make sense? So, where do thoughts come from? Where do thoughts come from? See, here's the thing. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 30 people in the room. I'm the only one talking. Or am I? You know how many conversations we're having right now? It's not 1 in 30. It's 1 in about 300. 1 in about 400. Because I've said something that, how many of you have thought of somebody else who said, oh, that's what so-and-so said, or that's what I read in that book? If I'm doing this with you and you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, you're having a conversation with somebody at work, on your network marketing team, in your business, a subordinate, how many conversations are going on if there's just the two of you? A dozen at least. How many of us have ever had a conversation with somebody and recognized you just lost them? So how do you find them? Just go back, recognize it. How many of you said, listen, I just think you just jumped the rails on this conversation. I apologize. I forced you off, I forced you out of this conversation. See, there's the pool of dialogue. What happens if the pool gets poisoned? Who dies? Everybody dies. And what's putting poison into the pool? Silence. Or the 2 worst words you could ever hear. Anybody know what the 2 worst words are in a conversation that you could ever hear? You're right. Shoot yourself. It'll be a lot less painful for you. Somebody goes, you're right, you're right. By default, that makes them what? You're wrong. Your goal is to get them to that's right. You're right, done. You just lost it. They jumped the rails. They ain't coming back. You've activated their amygdala, the fight or flight, and as soon as the fight or flight system is activated, you lose 25% of your ability to think straight. That's why if you've ever been in an argument and somebody goes, oh my God, did you hear what you said? I can't believe you said that. I'm like, said what? You don't remember what you said? What did I say? Anybody of us ever forget what we said in an argument? It's because the fight or flight was activated. We lost 25% of our cognitive ability. If you get into that spot, start asking yourself the questions. The easiest question you could ask yourself is, what time is it? If I asked you right now, what time is it? Instantly, you're trying to guess what time it is. You're going to look at your watch. I took you out of wherever you were, and I just forced the direction of the question. If you ever feel yourself starting to boil up inside, start using some logic questions. What time is it? What day is it? What color is it? What temperature is it? What color are my shoes? And you leave that fight or flight. Does that make sense? So where do thoughts come from? Did I just hit you? I thought I just hit you with the laser. They come from our survival programming. What do you mean survival programming? Take a baby. What does a baby do when they want attention? Right? Who's ever had a puppy? If the first thing we ever say, if the puppy gets up, they got to what? Eat or go poop. We know that's their routine. We know a baby when they cry. Now, the challenge is they cry, we respond. So what have we just set in their mind? They can't even communicate yet, or can they? And we've just set a pattern that they make noise, we pick up. They make noise. How many of us have ever said to somebody, don't pick them up? Leave them in the crib. Right? We're trying to break a pattern. So that's our survival program. Guess what? That survival programming never stops. How many of us are trying to survive today? So we go to school, we want to get good grades. Who do we want to impress? The teacher. We want to have our friends, right? We want to be part of the cool group. Or we make our own cool group if we're not part of the cool group. That was me. Then we go to work. How do we not get fired? By doing just enough work that we don't get fired. But based on who's what? Conditions. Our bosses, we do just enough work, and if we really want to excel, we'll do what? A little bit more. So we can get a what? A promotion based on what? Somebody else's idea of what we do should give us more money. We get into a marriage. We want to keep the marriage happy and fun and all of this stuff, and so we'll do things that maybe we didn't want to do. We'll say things we didn't necessarily want to say. We don't set what? Those things are called boundaries. That's part of our survival programming. How many of you are, anybody left-handed in the room? Cool. Congratulations. The rest of us are right-handed. The rest of this workshop, I all want you to write with your left hand. How many of you would just go, what the heck? It's not comfortable. Think of how many years you are. Think of how many years you've been programmed by you and others. And now this guy with the funky shirt shows up and goes, hey, forget all that. You can't forget it all. What you can do is recognize every time it helps you jump the rails and go, no, I'm getting back on the rails. Screw it. I'm getting on the pavement. I'm not going on the rails anymore. But you've got to recognize when you're off so you can what? Correct and get back on. Are you saying we got to monitor every one of our thoughts until your new pattern exists? I forget who said it. I know a lot of quotes, but I forget who say them. But there was somebody who said, the most difficult thing for man to do is the idea of sustained thought. If I were to ask you to focus on your couch at home, focus on it, see maybe somebody sitting on it, but just see it there. See what's around it, see what's the pictures behind it or the windows behind it. Raise your hand the second that thought loses and something else jumps in. It happens. It's sustained thought. That's why meditation. We're all trying to get into what? Balance. Well, you got the significance expert sitting here. There is no such thing as balance. Balance doesn't exist. What? If you want to make more money, what are you going to have to give up? Time, right? Until you can figure out how to have ideas that are worth $1 million every week, and then you really don't have to worry. But then you got to spend time doing what? With the time. So until you get into balance, you're going to be way out of balance. But if you're doing something you love and not doing something else, well, how come you don't spend time with us anymore? I'm doing something I love. You get this? So, our pre-wired programming, our environmental programming. How many of you, who's ever heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza? Cool. So, here's what I want you to do real quick. Look at everybody around you and introduce yourself as a genius. Say, hi, I'm Diana and I'm a genius. Go ahead, introduce yourselves as a genius to the people at your table. Now, I want you to look at that person and go, hey, it's great to meet you. You are a genius. How many of you thought, what the hell was that? But aren't you a genius? If the person that you're looking to become, aren't they a genius? So you can't have anything you don't already have. Every idea, every thought, every step, every skill, every ability you're looking for is already where? Inside you. It can't not be. If you had to learn to speak Russian to make $1 million in the next week, how many of you could? I wasn't even thinking of that. Хорошо, спасибо. Поцелуй мустрako. I hope you don't know what that meant. So my point is, now, how come we kind of could have a dialogue and everybody's going, oh, that sounds like Russian? Because you didn't know it. You're not programmed for it. The success you're looking for, how many of it's in Russian? And you go, I've heard it. I think I have, what? Spasibo. And yet, I know what that means. How many of us hear the little things of our success and we go, I know what that means, and we disregard everything else of our success plan and we go, I don't know what that is, so I'll never know what that is, so I'll never do that. Stop. You're a genius. How many of you believe your thoughts can influence your day? How many of you sat down this morning and spent 30 minutes creating your day? Cool. I can pretty much guarantee where you'll be a year from now. The Harvard study, we all heard that, right? 1968, they took all of the Harvard graduates, they monitored them over the next 20 years, and what did they find out? That 3% wound up creating as much wealth as the other 97% combined. What was the one difference? They wrote it down. How many of you wrote down notes and you said, man, this is awesome? And I bet I couldn't find it a week from now. A dear friend of mine said this, write this down. Your notes are your uncashed checks. Your notes are your uncashed checks. Scott and I meet usually every Sunday and have our mastermind conversation. I ask him to keep me in shape and tuned up, tuned in, fired up, and fired on. And a lot of times we'll sit down and we'll talk with each other and we'll go back and we'll just look like from the last 3 weeks of our notes with each other. And go, you know, we should be doing some of this stuff. It's why I'm so prolific on Facebook and on YouTube, not because I do it for me, it's for a digital footprint for him. I decided that many years ago. Nobody needs to hear a farm boy from Ohio, at least I don't think they do. But I want to be a resource for him. I want to be a library for my son, and I want to be a library for 600 generations from now. How long do you want your story to last? How many generations should be enough? Write it down. What's the number? 3? 300? If 300 generations from now, that's 1,200 years, right? 4 times 3 is 12, 1,200 years. 1,200 years from now, you still want your story to be told. Is this what they're going to talk about? I hope the answer is yes. Because every day you have a breakthrough, right? There's a good book out there of what to do and what not to do, right? Usually the what not to do's in the red writing. Where's your story going to reside? You've had enough of the what not to do's. But if you don't leave that as a legacy, as the breadcrumbs for future generations, guess what they're going to do? Repeat it. Isn't your story worth learning from? Right now, if somebody had to learn about your story, where would they go and get it? I love those. Do you journal? Do you ever miss a day? Do you write that, recoup that day and add the next day? We've got audios on our phone. You don't have, who's heard of rev.com? REV.com. If you wanted just to have it transcribed for you, just talk into your phone. It's $1 a minute. If you're talking for 5 minutes, is it worth $5 a day instead of your Starbucks to have your life written down? Who wants to work harder? I don't get paid to work hard. I get paid to have brilliant ideas. Oh yeah, our personal programming and conditioning. How many of you, if you left this part of Texas and went to, I don't know, New York City, would say, hey, good morning, ma'am? How y'all doing? Culture's culture. Your programming can happen. All right, feelings arise from where? From inside of the brain. It's a chemical cocktail. The limbic system. If you're not familiar with the limbic system, get familiar with the limbic system. That's where all thoughts are designed and delivered from the limbic system. Energy comes in, thoughts come in. It decides whether I think that belief is pretty cool, be the one, be the love in the world, right? So that's pretty cool, but that turned into a chemical cocktail that makes me feel better about that. Sometimes I see bright lights and I get a little nervous. First time I ever got up to speak, I threw up like 5 times before I ever walked on stage. And then they came over to another group of them and they said, I want you to see the DNA unwinding. In those two groups, less than 1% of the DNA unwound. Then they took a third group and they said, I want you to have amazing intentions of the DNA unwinding. 26% of the DNA unwound by holding it in their hand. Thoughts become things. The things you are emotional about, that you're putting a tremendous amount of energy on, that you're addicted to, guess what? How many of us got a lot more of the same stuff we don't want that we had last week that we had this past week? How many of you are expecting the same kind of stuff next week as you are last week? Why? You can change it. But the challenge is if you change it, everybody that's expecting you to show up looking the way you look, dressed the way you dressed, if you showed up with purple hair, what would people say? You're giggling. How many of you, if you showed up dressed like this, if you went out and bought a pair of shoes like this, would people go, do what? Have you lost, what? Well, let me say that. Would anybody notice them if you don't normally wear them? And then you got to deal with what? Their crab pulling you back down. What if we shake things up a little? What if this weekend you decide, I'm going to put a little spice back in my life. I'm going to shake up my brain. I'm going to shake up my thoughts. How many of you, who ever heard of Stuart Wilde? Stuart Wilde, great book, 33 Steps to Your Infinite Self. One of the things I use with my coaching clients to break this addiction, how would you guys like to be able to break addiction this evening? Cool. When you go home and you take a shower, either tonight or in the morning, dry yourself off differently. You all have a routine to dry yourself off. I know you do. I've done this in 35 languages. Put the towel in a different place. How many of you, in your shower, you have some place like where you hang the towel, like where you can get to it while you step out of the shower? Put it far away so you actually have to walk across the towel and go, look at all the water. Oh my God. Yeah, right? How many of you actually would stand on a bath mat and just drip dry? Are you kidding? I got to wash the mat, and I got to do that, and this is that, and I got to wash that separately. That goes with the color clothes. It doesn't go. Recognize that stuff for what it is. It's static. Dry yourself off differently. Now, here's my disclaimer. I've had, usually it's women who call me and they try to take, because women are just so enthusiastic about breaking the rules when you realize you can go do more, be more, have more. And I've had women actually fall down in the shower because they were drying themselves off like in a pirouette. I don't know what they were doing. I didn't ask. They go, hey, listen, I tried that shower thing. I fell down. Okay, you got to be smarter than the floor, is all I can tell you. But how many of you are right now, you're starting to break out in a sweat going, what do you mean walk across? He said walk across the floor. Dripping wet? How many of you are going, well, I'm like, I barely get enough time to take a shower for myself, and I don't have time to do this crazy. Brush your teeth with your different hand. You really want to change it up? Sleep with your head at the foot of the bed, and not the head of the bed. How many of you just went, okay, now that's too far? Stuart Wilde would have students, and I have my students do this. Because the key is how fast can you break this? That's what it comes down to, right? How fast can you break the addiction? What would cause the, see, there's 2 days, write this down. There's 2 days you've had enough. The day is either handed to you, it's the day you decide. What's the day that's handed to you? I'll give you an example. Anybody ever know somebody that's a 4-pack-a-day smoker? The little grandbaby comes up to him and goes, "Grandpa, please don't smoke anymore," and they put the cigarettes down, never to touch them again. And then there's people who talk about it. I think Mark Twain said, he said, "Quitting smoking is the easiest thing I've ever done. I must have done it 200 times already." It's the day you've had enough. You've got to decide when that day is. Usually, that day that we've had enough is never for ourselves. It's for who? Somebody else. So I got to ask you this question. Who's waiting on you to be that person? And how long are you going to disappoint them? Oh, you didn't have to say that. Yeah, I did. Remember question number 2, make you feel uncomfortable? The good news is you're not in trouble for where you are. You're in trouble if what? You stay here. That make sense? Questions? I got a couple more slides, I think. I'm not sure. I think I do. Questions so far? Yes, sir. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I think what it was is I asked you, on a scale of 1 to 10, could you get any better in the second? Is that it? No? Okay. Okay. Okay, so, yes, I got to look up the name of this. Dr. Joe Dispenza wrote a good book, and I do a lot of books on tape. So he wrote this good book, and let me find it for you because this is powerful. I'm gonna give you a personal example of, I think it's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Is that what it's called, Mason? Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza. So how many of us believe that our thoughts can influence our environment? Okay. Ricardo, it's 11:30. What time do you want me to stop? I think so. 12:30. Something 30. How many? Okay. So, Mason did a study last year, Mace. How many of us have heard of Dr. Emoto, the hidden message in water? Okay, so I'll post the link if I'm allowed, or somewhere you can send me a message on Facebook. I'll send you the link. He did a study last year where he took 3 jars of water, wrote, "I love you" on the note, nothing, and "I hate you," and every day went to that and said, "I love you." And then every day skipped it over here, "I hate you," and got into state. Now, it's one thing to say, Dr. Emoto did it and it worked. It's another thing to do it and it worked. So, we have it all on video. He did the study because that was his 7th grade experiment. And then we did the outtakes. I said, okay, let's open them up. Let's see if this really worked. So he opened up the one that said, "I love you." 30 days, sealed water, all of that, rice in there, 30 days in the water, opened it up. One of the most beautiful smells ever. Opened up the "I hate you." Absolutely no smell, because there was an 1/8 inch of black tar that had formed on the top of it. Took that off. You see it in the video. You want to know what's the worst thing? The one in the middle, where he completely avoided it. Make a freight train take a dirt road with gagged maggots. It was the worst smelling thing ever. Dr. Emoto in his research said, do not ever abandon a child. At least hate it. It's better than nothing. And now he's doing an experiment this year just based on frequency. high energy, 554 megahertz, the God frequency. 19, the frequency that they used to, the Russian sent through the earth to China. They sent through the earth to try to us during the Cold War, because that low frequency, nothing can stop it. And then the other nothing jar. We put the exact same amount of rice in it. The rice in the high frequency jar is about that high. The rice in the hate jar, the low frequency, is almost doubled in size. So if you listen to bad frequency, what's it swelling in your brain? Why do kids have ADD, ADHD? Why do they have headaches all the time? So, all that being said, what have you taken away so far? What'd you learn, what'd you like? What's one thing you learned from our conversation, one thing you like? And I hit the button again, so that means we're done. What have you learned, what have you liked? This isn't TV, I can see you and hear you. What'd you learn, what'd you like? So how many of you deal with people? Use these 2 questions. Use the 3 questions I asked you that allowed me to take you on any path I wanted. Do I have your permission to help, make you feel uncomfortable, take you out of that uncomfortable feeling? That'll allow you to control any conversation without being controlling. The last thing you want to do whenever you leave somebody is make sure that they got some of the information you had and that they're going to do something with it, because knowledge without power is what? Nothing. Power doesn't exist till you put it into action. So, one thing you learned, one thing you liked, real quick. What's one thing you learned, one thing you liked? Everybody's going to say something real quick. When you get that, that's like, oh my God, everybody's told me. Your kids, he says, you're right. Oh! Awesome. That's one thing you liked, one thing you learned. Not that I taught you anything. Cool, that's awesome. You don't have to say anything else. What's one thing you learned, one thing you like? And so when you start to do that, the subconscious is going to go, what are you doing? We're supposed to be mad right now. And you just got to constantly keep asking the questions. Awesome. Yep. It's called habituation. We habitualize ourselves to any situation instantly. Can you guys hear the air conditioning? Can you hear it now? It was there the whole time. But now you stop listening to me and you start listening to that. See how instantly we fit into our environment? So that's what happens, called habituation. One thing you learned, one thing you liked. Isn't it crazy? So here's the thing. If y'all are addicted, guess who you're going to speak to? What are they? They're addicted too. So when they start fighting who they are, what they are, say, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Don't go, oh my God, this would be so good for you. Just shut up and listen to me. Never had that before. What'd you learn, what'd you like? Isn't that crazy? That's huge. Awesome. What'd you learn, what'd you like? Yeah, even if they're not so good. One thing you learned, one thing you like. Congratulations. Now, guess what? We're leaders in here, right? As you're listening to people talk about what they learned, what they liked, don't we learn what we lack? You follow me? So if you're going to go talk to her anymore, what would be the most important thing you could talk to her about? Her in the university. Him about saying, you know what? I was just like you, right? Empathy. You see how we can instantly connect with people once we know their deepest desires? Man, one thing you learned, one thing you liked. Isn't that awesome? Cool. What else? And the brain forces us into that because the brain doesn't want to have to use all of its energy. It has to be able to deal with the fight or flight or anything else, right? Who's heard of the saber-toothed tiger? Right? That's why we have our fight or flight mechanism. Well, last time I checked, we're going to walk out here, ain't no saber-toothed tiger going to jump us. But an email will. Somebody's post on Facebook will. Would you learn, would you like? Hold on. It's called U Squared is the book, and who's the author? He's here in Dallas. U Squared. Price Pritchett talks about the quantum leap. The opening story inside of the book is the fly banging up against the window. I sat down with him and talked. He says, I couldn't come up with the opening for the book. He says, then I'm sitting at my lake house, and there's this fly just buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. He was facing this way. He turned around, and it hit him. The fly is going to die on a windowsill when the steps to freedom is just 7 feet away out that door. Sometimes light is the oncoming train. That's why it's so hard for incremental growth. You can instantly double your income in the next 6 months. I guarantee it. I've done it with people thousands of times. Yep. Cool. Counterfeit, confirmation, and commitment. That's one thing you learn. One thing you learn. So, would you say that she's a people pleaser? She's somebody that wants to make sure she will give every ounce of her life for somebody else. The key is we got to start with you first. Is that okay? Okay, good. Love you for saying that. How about you? So as you go through this process, understand that as you start to follow your heart, your brain is going to put up one hell of a fight, right? And so again, we're getting emotional now. That's okay, but just know that whenever that happens, say, somebody's waiting on me. So my goal in life, my mission statement is 2 words. Renee Britton, in her book, Power, it'll come to me in a second. Come up with a 2-word mission statement. Mine is courageous integrity. So if I'm not being courageous, I'm not living in integrity. In order for me to be in integrity, I constantly have to be stepping out. My goal in life is to be a better dad, better husband every day. How does standing here in front of you, normally I'm not blessed to have my son here. But normally I'm standing here. Why would taking away a Saturday morning make me a better dad, better husband? Because I'm very selfish. I want more smiles in the world, and I have 30 people here that I can incorporate, that I can ask, that I can task to put more smiles in the world. Because last week when I was in, where was I, Scott? I don't even know where I was. Wherever I was at, Little Rock. A smile showed up in his life, and a smile showed up in my family's life, my bride's life, and it was because of somebody like you had put one in the world, and it showed up, and for that I'm forever grateful. I'm very clear. It can't be complicated. It's got to be I can do it in every breath. Thank you for asking that. How about you? Yep. Yeah. Right. Yep. Chemical cocktails, yep. So it's awesome. So how many times have we heard, hey, listen, just taste life. You got to taste life. That's that. That's that experience. Cool. So here's what I'm going to offer you. I'm going to leave it. I'm turning back over to Ricardo. If anybody would like to give me a little testimonial, 30 seconds on a piece of the camera, just something that says, listen, I would listen to Sean, blah, 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 whatever. I would love to give you an hour to hour and a half one-on-one private session. I normally charge $500 for that. I want to give that to you, but I would love to have your little testimonial if you're willing to give that to me. I'd be happy to give that to you, and we'll schedule it at your time. Fair enough? So with that, North Texas Firewalkers, Thank you for letting me come into your home and spend some time.
Big round of applause for Mr. Sean Murphy, everybody.